Good day everyone. Today we will talk about what is summative assessments. We all know that summative assessments are used primarily to document student performance, to monitor and record student proficiency, to give students grades, to report to parents, for selection into special programs, for conferring of honors, for establishing a record of performance, for accountability, and as evidence of student learning to evaluate teachers, and for college admissions and employers. Sometimes summative assessments are used formatively and formative assessments are used summatively. Summative assessments may be used to plan instruction. Seat work, usually formative assessments, could be thought of as mini summative assessments. The primary difference between summative and formative assessment is in the use of evidence. The primary purpose of summative assessment is to establish a score or grade to represent what students know and can do. Let's go to planning summative assessment. The first step in constructing classroom summative assessment is to review the criteria for high quality assessments. Example of these questions when creating planning and summative assessment. Are there clear and appropriate learning targets? What method of assessments is the best match? And will the evidence allow valid inferences? How can an error be minimized? These are most of the questions in planning summative assessments. An assessment blueprint can be used to determine representative sample. It is a set of specifications that indicates what students are responsible for learning. Teachers need to examine the blueprint to see how the example came out. There can be tendency to oversample areas the teacher particularly likes include mostly questions about simple facts. They're easiest to write. When it comes to number of lengths of assessments, many short assessments can provide the same, if not better information than a single long assessment. Length should be determined first without regard to the number. This helps determine how many questions or how many are required for a representative sample of the domain. Beginning constructing an assessment before a unit begins. Otherwise, there may be not be sufficient time to administer the test that meets high quality criteria. The use of published assessments, example of these include ready-made tests, items from textbook and testing companies, often provided in digital format. Banks of items provided by school, district central offices, and school department offices. Usually prepared for chapter and unit assessments and often aligned with year and accountability tests. Published assessments may be useful. Items should be reviewed for a reliability and validity. Published assessments should not be assumed. First, teacher should identify the learning targets. The published assessments may be technically sound but not good at much. The language and terminology used should be reviewed. It needs to be appropriate and consistent with instruction. In preparing students for classroom summative assessments, to obtain a fair and accurate indication of student learning, a few simple steps should be used to prepare students. First, make sure students have adequate test-taking skills. There are legitimate skills. Students should know how to be able to show their best work. Pay attention to directions. Read each item in entirely before answering. Plan and outline responses to essay questions. Use clear writing for answers. Pace and pace themselves. In making summative assessments, item, type, and format are essential. Make sure students are familiar with the format and type of questions and response needed. Give students practice test items. Have students practice writing test items themselves. Can serve as a review question or a review session. Familiarity with the type of format or item can lessen test anxiety. Teach to the test by instructing students about what they will be tested on. Do not use examples in class identical to the test items. Another, inform students about the length of the test and how it will count in their grades. A test blueprint can accomplish this, as what I said a while ago. Use item formats that match those on accountability tests. It's easy to overuse the multiple choice format. One type of item is rarely an accurate measure. Use the type that maximize engagement and learning. Constructed responses items often are best for detecting errors. Teachers should tell students as soon as possible after beginning a unit when the test is scheduled. Give students adequate time to prepare. Avoiding giving tests on days that make it difficult for students to perform their capability. Example, from day or right after spring vacation. Schedule tests for when the teacher will be present, not when the class has a substitute. Examples of summative assessments include chapter tests, unit tests, semester tests, common tests, final papers, reports, and presentations. Assessments of learning document students' performance. Classroom summative assessments are taken after an instructional unit. Poorly prepared summative assessments tend to discourage student involvement, promote extrinsic motivation, and emphasize testing of knowledge. Well-planned summative assessments consist of representative sampling of learning targets, the appropriate number of items, and skeptical use of items provided by test publishers. Students should be prepared for taking summative tests by having adequate test-taking, test wiseness skills, knowledge of the format and types of questions, and an adequate review of material. That would be all. Thank you.